They were getting ready to fire me, but you wouldn't know it from the workload they were still piling on my desk. I had just closed a $10 million deal, and the company was refusing to pay my $300,000 commission. HR claimed that according to my file, my starting salary was just $55,000 a year with a $10,000 performance bonus after my probationary period. They insisted no mention of commission, ever. The boss ordered me to hand over my accounts and get the hell out. But I'm not a pushover. I was still out of state on a business trip when one of my old colleagues gave me a heads up. They're cleaning house, he'd said over a secure line. Having just signed the biggest contract of my career, I was stuck. I could only watch from afar as the new general manager, Isabel, started carving up my territory and handing pieces to the new hires she'd brought in. But I wasn't about to roll over. I immediately called our regional distributor and arranged a flash sale to move the remaining inventory. 2 days was all it took to clear out half the stock. I even bought a unit myself, for the record, and made sure to get a formal, itemized receipt. The distributor, seeing a chance to make a quick buck, was more than happy to play along. After finalizing the distribution contract and running a full training session for their team, I flew back to Chicago. I worked for Marcus Thorne for 8 years. I was there when we were just a 7-person startup crammed into a shared workspace. Now, we were a publicly traded company. I climbed the ladder from an admin role to a senior marketing strategist, and because I had a knack for dealing with people and smoothing over rough edges, Marcus often sent me out to court investors. I was, for all intents and purposes, upper management. But Marcus's new wife, Isabel Vance, never liked us old-timers. Last month, Marcus leveraged his majority stake to execute a hostile takeover of a major competitor, installing himself as the new chairman of their board. That sealed our fate. He wasn't about to let the old guard from his first kingdom get comfortable in his new empire. And so the purge began, with his wife Isabel, the newly appointed GM, as the executioner. The management team at the new company was entirely her people. At the old office, we were picked off one by one. First, she called in some favors with a state regulator to launch a surprise audit, which was enough to scare our CFO and head of procurement into early retirement. Most people who get to that level have a few skeletons in their closet. Leaving quietly meant they could enjoy their golden years. The ones who resisted got a visit from the FBI. The few of us with clean hands were targeted for past professional errors. Faced with the threat of lawsuits demanding ruinous damages, they all tendered their resignations. No one wanted a terminated for cause on their record. This industry is smaller than you think. My record was spotless, but I knew I couldn't just wait for the axe to fall. When Isabel finally called me in her office, I cut right to the chase. I know what this is about, Isabel. I've given 8 years of my life to this company. I've helped build it. I've never done a single thing to harm its interests. I'm in my late 30s now. I can't compete with the kids fresh out of college. Let's just make this clean. She smirked, thinking I was about to go quietly. Here's the deal, I continued. 8 years of service. Standard severance is 2 weeks' pay per year, so that's 4 months' salary. My average monthly compensation, with bonuses, is about $25,000. So that's $100,000. Add the $300,000 commission I just earned, and we'll call it an even $400,000. A check for that amount, and I'm gone. Isabel's face twisted into a mask of disbelief. $400,000? You gotta be kidding me. Why would I be kidding? It's standard severance, plus the commission I'm contractually owed. Nothing outrageous about it. And by the way, if you want me out today, you'll have to add another month's pay in lieu of notice. If you give me 2 weeks, we can stick with the original number. It was obvious she had no intention of playing fair, so I laid my cards on the table. It was foolish, really, to antagonize someone who knew the company's inner workings inside and out, all over a few $100,000. I was going to teach her that I was not someone to be trifled with. Isabel scoffed. I'm just here for a preliminary chat. You could discuss the details with HR. She turned and walked out. I didn't get angry. I just waited for the call. When it came, the HR rep's words made my blood boil. Leo, I've reviewed your employment agreement. The contract you signed at the beginning of the year was a new hire agreement, not a renewal. So, your tenure is less than 1 year. There's no way we can authorize a 4-month severance package. My head spun. They had me sign a mountain of annual paperwork. They must have slipped that in. Furthermore, he continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy, Your contract clearly states a base salary of $55,000 with a potential $10,000 performance bonus. There is no mention of commission. The deposits to your account beyond that amount were discretionary bonuses paid from Mr. Thorne's personal account, not official salary. Given your tenure of less than a year, the most we can offer is 2 weeks' pay. That comes to about $2,000. Ms. Vance is feeling generous, so she's authorized a one-time payment of $5,000. You can sign the papers now, or we can take this to arbitration. That could drag on for months, you know. It was such a shameless, infuriating lie. They were treating me like an idiot. But I wasn't some clueless kid. I laughed coldly into the phone. I didn't work at that company for 8 years without learning where the bodies are buried. Marcus knows exactly how I was paid, and so does the IRS. Or at least they will. Let's see how much he enjoys a full-scale tax audit. The penalties will cost him a hell of a lot more than my severance. That evening, I got a call from Marcus. He sounded pained, putting on his best good cop routine. Leo, you know how Isabel is. She spent her formative years in London, very direct, by the book. Let's not make this ugly, right? Where was he when she was trying to screw me over? I wasn't in the mood for games. Marcus, my terms are simple. Pay me what you owe me. If you won't, we'll see each other in court. And if we can't part on good terms, then you'd better be prepared to pay back every dollar you've hidden from the government over the years. We're all law-abiding, tax-paying citizens here, right? The line went silent for a moment. I knew he had started recording the call. So had I. I'd recorded every conversation since this whole thing started, precisely for this reason. Finally, Marcus spoke. Look, my focus is on the new company now. Isabel is running things over there. Why don't you two talk again tomorrow? Talk tomorrow? Isabel was no doubt sitting right next to him. They were just buying time to figure out their next move. Fine by me. Let them come. To my surprise, Isabel's next move was even more aggressive. The message came through her lawyer. Sue us. His termination followed all standard procedures. I had no idea where she got that confidence, but I knew what I had to do. I organized my files. 1. A whistleblower complaint to the SEC detailing how the company bribed city officials to secure zoning permits for a new development and then used those same connections to fraudulently obtain R&D grants. It also included evidence of kickbacks to secure contracts with public institutions, constituting unfair competition. 2. A report to the National Science Foundation, with evidence that the company falsified data and financial statements on its grant applications. I had the original, unaltered data. 3. A detailed report to the IRS outlining years of tax evasion. 4. My wrongful termination lawsuit, complete with my salary history, bank statements, and the audio recordings of my recent conversations. At every agency, they asked why I was coming forward. My answer was always the same. As a citizen, it's my duty to report illegal activities. The court date was 3 days away. In the interim, my phone blew up with calls from intermediaries telling me to drop it. A couple of thugs showed up at my parents' house, scaring them so badly they fled to a relative's. After getting them settled, my resolve hardened into steel. Even the judge seemed to be on their side. Your former employer isn't unwilling to compensate you, he said during a preliminary hearing. Why don't you try to negotiate? Why file all these complaints? I gave him a cold smile. Isabel had pushed me into this corner, and now they were trying to paint me as the aggressor. Your Honor, with all due respect, let's stick to the matters relevant to this case. On the day of the trial, my lawyer laid out our evidence and played the first recording. Then, the company's lawyer dropped a bombshell, a countersuit. My client terminated Mr. Hayes for cause, he announced. The $10 million contract he signed last month was canceled. The distributor returned the entire shipment, citing inadequate and improper training provided by Mr. Hayes as the reason. He produced a stack of documents, return authorizations, credit memos, shipping manifests. He argued that not only was I not owed a commission, but my incompetence had cost the company millions, justifying my immediate termination without severance. My lawyer's jaw dropped. He turned to me and whispered, "Why didn't you tell me about this?" I calmly stood up. So, every single unit was returned. That is correct, the company lawyer affirmed. I raised my phone and hit record, pointing it at him. Order, the judge barked. No recording in my courtroom. I ignored him, my voice ringing out. I just have one question. In this hall of justice, when the opposing counsel knowingly presents fraudulent evidence, shouldn't that be on the record? Because last I checked, presenting false evidence to a court is a felony, and I will be contacting the police. My lawyer looked at me like I'd lost my mind. But then I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the single unit I had purchased, along with the dated receipt. You said the entire shipment was returned. Then what exactly is this? The opposing lawyer stammered. We will recompile our documentation for the next hearing. The judge called for a recess and practically ordered the company to settle. Their lawyer claimed he had no idea the evidence was falsified and would have to confer with his client. That night, Isabel called me, absolutely livid, screaming that she would bury me. Bring it on, I told her. I hadn't even played my trump card yet. I called Art Jenkins, the distributor. I had done the training. I had photos, videos, and signed affidavits. After the contract was signed, I had personally done ride-alongs with his sales team. The return order was dated after I had already filed my lawsuit. They had approached him and cooked up this scheme well over a month after he had taken delivery. The product was already on shelves. There was no way to recall all of it. Art, what the hell were you thinking? I said when he picked up. Helping them forge documents for a court case. That's a felony. You could do hard time for that. He immediately clammed up. Hey, I just signed a few papers. What's this about breaking the law? Don't play dumb with me, Art. I said, my voice like ice. You've been around long enough to know better. What did they offer you? What was worth risking a prison sentence to screw me over? I decided to bluff. Their lawyer already admitted in court that the evidence was faked. If you don't cooperate, you're going down with them. Art wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. Big guts, but easily spooked. He crumbled. Look, my daughter, her medical bills are over $100,000 a month. I'm only clearing 6, maybe 700,000 a year. I'm already underwater. I can't let anything happen to her. Save it. I cut him off. I don't have time for your sob story. He had tried to ruin me. My sympathy was in short supply. Art sighed heavily. They offered me an additional 5% margin on all future orders. That's hundreds of thousands a year. I just wasn't thinking straight. Can you tell the prosecutor I was coerced? If I go to prison, my daughter... I never intended to drag Art into it. My fight was with Marcus and Isabel. All I wanted was what was rightfully mine. I told him if he cooperated, I'd leave him out of it. He thanked me profusely, then started apologizing. I hung up, saved the recording, and sent it to Marcus with a simple message. Perjury is a serious crime. You really want to go down for this? The next day, Marcus called. Leo, the company is expanding. Money is tight everywhere. We just don't have that kind of cash on the books. Can you take a little less? I just laughed. He gritted his teeth. Fine. We'll settle. We'll meet at the courthouse, sign the agreement, and you get your money. A pause. The agreement will include a non-disclosure and a clause stating you will drop all complaints. A classic Marcus Thor move. The severance is one payment, I said coldly. My silence is another. Let's not confuse the two. He was quiet for a long moment. Let's meet in person. Fine by me. Isabel's demeanor was much improved, though her expression was still sour. We met in a sterile conference room. $1 million, she said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. We can wire it to you today. You take it, and this all goes away. No more games. She was a piece of work. 2 months in the country, and she'd managed to surgically remove most of the company's original management. That Ivy League MBA was certainly paying off. I shook my head. This was never about the money. It's about doing things the right way. And this feels a lot like you're trying to set me up for an extortion charge. By the way, I've been recording this entire conversation since I walked in. You might want to choose your words carefully. My wrongful termination suit, combined with a wire transfer for a sum far exceeding any standard severance, would be all they needed to paint me as a blackmailer. She was as clever as she was vicious. Isabel's smile didn't waver. It seems there's been a misunderstanding. I want you gone, yes, but I'm not a monster. I can have the $1 million delivered to you in cash. No wire transfers, no records. Just your severance pay. How's that sound? I thought it over. It seemed clean. You're a woman who gets things done, Isabel, I said with a nod. Once you have the money, this matter is closed, she said. And who knows? When you land on your feet, maybe our companies can partner on something. A win-win. I just smiled without saying a word. After signing the settlement agreement, I walked out with a duffel bag full of cash. I'd barely gotten home and dropped the bag on the floor when there was a knock on the door. 2 police officers. Leo Hayes, we're here to investigate a complaint of extortion. We need you to come with us. I didn't say anything, my mind racing. Isabel had signed a settlement. She knew I had proof of the company's crimes. Why would she choose mutually assured destruction? She must have another card to play. My lawyer advised me to return the money and beg for a plea deal. Leo, you're looking at serious time, he said gravely. For what? I took a severance payment I was owed. He sighed. They claim you threatened to report them to federal agencies unless they paid you $1 million. They have a video of you accepting a bag of cash. It's an open-end shut case. Without a letter of leniency from them, you're looking at a 10-year mandatory minimum. Even with one, it's 5. And one more thing, he added. They paid all their back taxes, with interest and penalties. Your leverage with the IRS is gone. Paid it all back. Just to get me, a single manager? It would have cost them tens of millions. What was so important about crushing me? Then it hit me. 1, to make an example of me. 2, to make sure none of the remaining old-timers ever thought of fighting back. At the next hearing, Isabel and Marcus sat there looking regal and untouchable. But I wasn't rattled. First, I had my lawyer play the audio of Isabel explicitly stating the $1 million was my severance pay. Then, I had him refile my wrongful termination suit. Since the first one was withdrawn as part of the settlement they were now claiming was extortion, I was within my rights. This would legally frame the $1 million payment as a legitimate settlement. But that was just the defense. Now it was time to attack. I produced my new evidence. We had over 600 corporate clients nationwide. I had records showing that at least 90% of them involved kickbacks. I have a good habit. I document everything. I had the original files, emails, and transaction records for every bribe the company had ever paid. Large ones in the hundreds of thousands, small ones like a case of expensive bourbon. Whether the transaction passed through my hands or not, if I knew about it, I had a record of the time, place, and people involved. They couldn't even accuse me of bribery myself. Any gifts I had personally authorized never exceeded the $1,000 legal limit. I gave the entire dossier to my lawyer with instructions to send a copy to the internal compliance and ethics committees of all 600 client companies. Even if no one was arrested, every single one of those companies would launch an internal investigation. Once they started digging, they would realize what kind of company they were dealing with. They would never do business with Apex Innovations again. Marcus would lose 80% of his client base overnight. And if I cooperated fully with the authorities, the company wouldn't just lose clients. It would be forced into bankruptcy. Marcus, Isabel, and anyone else involved would be going to prison. It was an all-out war that lasted over 3 months. I gave 5 depositions to the FBI, 3 to the IRS, and lost count of the meetings with the Department of Labor. It was a grueling, soul-crushing process, but I never once thought about giving up. They'd try to cut me out, but they'd accidentally sever an artery. Now, they were bleeding out, and it was their own damn fault. My victory was inevitable, but I underestimated their shamelessness. They had the audacity to ask for another settlement. Not a chance. I refused without a second thought. Marcus, who always played the smiling patriarch, finally dropped the act. His voice was cold and arrogant. Leo, you worked for me for 8 years. Did you ever know that the legal owner of Apex Innovations is my father? Marcus was 53. His father was nearly 90, wheelchair-bound with severe diabetes. This wasn't a plea for sympathy. It was a threat. This room is swept for bugs, Leo, he said, gesturing around the private club's meeting room. There's a signal jammer. No electronics work in here. So I'll be blunt. My father is the legal signatory on everything. If anyone goes to prison, it's him. He leaned in, and in his condition, he'll never see the inside of a cell. He'll be remanded to a medical facility. The care is excellent. He can't work. He doesn't use a phone. He'll live out his days in peace. All the illicit income from Apex went through my father's accounts. I've already moved the clean money. No matter what happens, I will not go to jail. He sat back, a smug look on his face. You can't win. The mask was off completely. He had already siphoned the assets from Apex to his new company. He didn't care if I burned the old one to the ground. And even if you win the lawsuit, he added, what then? You think anyone will hire you? In this industry, one word from me, and you'll never work again. I just looked at him. It's a big world, Marcus. There are still places your shadow doesn't reach. I got up and walked out. Marcus thought he had me cornered, but he wasn't the only one with a hidden card. The former chairman of the company he'd taken over, Croft Legacy Corp., was in prison. Last week, he had supposedly slipped, fallen, and suffered massive brain hemorrhage. He was now in a coma in the ICU. The timing was too convenient to be a coincidence. The old man's family still controlled a 28% stake in the company, though the shares were frozen. If he was exonerated, or if he died and his son inherited them, Marcus and Isabel's combined 25% stake would no longer be enough to control the board. I brought a fruit basket to the hospital, but I couldn't even get into the room. His son, Julian Croft, blocked the doorway. "What do you want?" he sneered. "Come to gloat? Heard you got thrown to the wolves, too." I kept my smile calm. Your father can't sign over his voting rights while he's in a coma, and his shares are still frozen. Instead of sitting here feeling sorry for yourself, you should be focused on your company. His face fell. I've been completely sidelined. Thorne is a shark. He used a shell company and a short-selling scheme to steal my family's legacy. He's packed the board with his own people. What do you want me to do? Go up against him and get myself killed? Julian was smart, but he lacked guts. Normally, I wouldn't waste my time. But these weren't normal times. "It's only been 2 months, I said in a low voice. Even Thorne can't replace everyone that quickly. You still have loyalists inside. You have evidence. If you sit back and wait, he'll consolidate his power, and then your evidence will be worthless. Let's lay our cards on the table. See what we've both got." He was hesitant, but I could see the wheels turning. He knew I was right. What I didn't account for was that Marcus had no intention of letting me walk away from our meeting. On the drive home from the hospital, I noticed them. 4 black minivans boxing me in front, back, and both sides. They were closing the gap, forcing me to slow down. The thugs from my parents' house. This was how Marcus Thorne operated. When legitimate tactics failed, he turned to brute force. The most sophisticated business disputes are often won by the most primitive means. If I died here tonight in a traffic accident, the drivers would turn themselves in. Road rage, drunk driving, whatever the story, it would never trace back to Marcus. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, searching for an opening. They wanted to stop me, but they weren't suicidal. As we approached the Clark Street Bridge, an idea hit me. I unbuckled my seatbelt, unlocked the doors, and wrenched the steering wheel hard to the right. The car smashed through the guardrail. For a split second, as the world turned upside down, I thought of my grandmother, who passed years ago. "Grandma, look out for your boy." The car hit the Chicago River with a sickening impact that nearly knocked me unconscious. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I forced the door open and scrambled out. The river's current wasn't too strong. The bridge was covered in traffic cameras. Someone would have called 911. The water was murky brown, silt churning everywhere. I swam blindly downstream, guided by pure instinct. After what felt like an hour, my body gave out. Hypothermia was setting in, my limbs shaking uncontrollably. I was still miles from anywhere I could safely get out. All I could do was flow on my back and pray. The city lights blurred into a meaningless smear. I was drifting into unconsciousness when a sharp, searing pain shot through my hand. My eyes snapped open. I'd been snagged by a fishing hook. Some hardcore anglers were fishing off a private pier in the middle of the night. This was my only chance. I grabbed the fishing line and wrapped it around my wrist. It was high-quality braided line. The guy on the other end was pulling hard, but it held. Through the fog of exhaustion, I heard voices. "I got one. It's a big one. Feels like a 100-pounder. You hook a sturgeon. In your dreams, man. Hey, if it's that big, let me get a picture. I've been skunked for 3 days straight. All I caught yesterday was a bullfrog. A cold wind blew, and another voice, quieter, said, 'You guys know what tonight is, right? Halloween. What if you hooked? You know. Something weird? I am not ending up on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries.' Before anyone could answer, my head broke the surface. The night erupted in a symphony of blood-curdling screams. Holy SH, it's a body. A dead body. Call 911. My voice was a raw whisper. Guys, not dead. I'm not dead. I spent 3 days in a hospital. The police said the drivers who ran me off the road were just local troublemakers on a joyride. No evidence of a conspiracy. Of course not. Marcus was always clean. I was done playing games. He had tried to kill me. He didn't just want my career, he wanted my life. I had everything. The complete, unredacted data from the Shell Corporation Marcus used to manipulate the market and illegally acquire his shares. A step-by-step record of his scheme. The Shell company had only $3 million in registered capital. None of it actually paid in. It had zero revenue and zero profit. He'd used it to approach Croft Legacy's major shareholders, offering them high-yield, short-term loans in exchange for using their company's shares as collateral. He created the illusion of a massive new round of financing, driving the stock price from $14 to $25 a share. Then, at its peak, he secretly sold off borrowed shares, shorting the stock and cashing out. Right after, he announced the financing deal had fallen through. He pulled the ladder out from under the stock, then spread rumors of a sex scandal involving the chairman and financial misconduct, which got the old man arrested and his shares frozen. As the stock price cratered, Marcus used his profits from the short sale to cover his position and buy up the now worthless shares from the panicked board members he'd trapped. Isabel had used a separate scheme involving a fraudulent land deal to acquire her own block of shares. Together, they had their controlling interest, but Isabel's land deal was dirty. She had bribed officials for it. That was a felony, and it involved the misuse of public resources. They were going to have to give it all back. I anonymously leaked evidence to a financial journalist that cleared the old chairman's name, proving the scandal was fabricated by Marcus and Isabel. The public pressure mounted. Meanwhile, Julian Croft, armed with my evidence, filed a lawsuit against Marcus and Isabel, alleging illegal acquisition of shares. He also filed a formal complaint with the SEC, arguing that their shell company takeover, backed by insufficient domestic funds and unapproved financing, constituted a deliberate and malicious deception of the market and its investors. Now, Marcus was truly panicked. He was calling in every favor he had, trying to make it all go away. He wasn't sorry. He was just scared. He wanted my career, my reputation, my life. I wasn't about to give him a second chance. His crimes weren't just against me. They were against thousands of investors, against the integrity of the entire market. Unsurprisingly, a judge ruled Marcus and Isabel's acquisition of Croft Legacy shares null and void. What was surprising was that the investigation uncovered evidence that the old chairman's fall in prison was arranged by Marcus. That added conspiracy to commit murder to their list of charges. They were going to be locked away for the rest of their lives. My own case was resolved first. With Art Jenkins's testimony, the court confirmed that the distributor's return was fraudulent. The $1 million was legally my severance pay, and the extortion charges were dropped. But even facing life in prison, Marcus wasn't broken. We spoke one last time, through the thick glass of a visitor's booth. "You think you've won?" he sneered, his voice full of arrogance. "I have a son. He'll get me out, and he will make you pay." He looked like a martyr, not a criminal. I just smiled. "What makes you so confident?" He said nothing, but his eyes burned with contempt. "You don't really think that money you move from your father's accounts is safe, do you?" I asked. His body went rigid. I delivered the final blow. "You made your father the legal fall guy. You ran all the dirty money through his accounts. And when you pulled it out, you didn't move it to a bank. You converted it all to gold bars and buried it under the wine cellar in your mansion. You thought you were creating a flawless nest egg for your son to use to rebuild and get you out. Am I wrong?" His eyes were filled with a murderous rage, but he kept his composure. "I have no idea what you're talking about." He would never admit defeat. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. His own voice, clear as day, filled the small space between us. "This room is swept for bugs, Leo. There's a signal jammer. I'll be blunt. My father is the legal signatory on everything. No matter what happens, I will not go to jail. You can't win." The recording played on, a perfect record of his arrogant confession. The color drained from his face. He shook his head frantically. "Impossible. How could you?" I cut him off. "You had a jammer running. I shouldn't have been able to record anything, right?" I leaned closer to the glass. "Marcus, you're a brilliant strategist, but you have one fatal flaw. You're arrogant. You thought you were the only one with tricks up your sleeve. For every signal jammer, there's a counter device that can record locally without transmitting. This is the 21st century, not the Stone Age." Marcus Thorne finally broke. He slumped in his chair, a completely defeated man. But he made one last, desperate plea. His voice cracked. Leo, we worked together for so long. I've lost everything. Do you have to be so ruthless? My son, he looked up to you like an uncle. If you take that money, he'll have nothing. He won't survive. I laughed. Now he wanted to play the sympathy card. The money he'd saved for his son was stolen. It was all being seized by the government, as it should be. His son's fate wasn't my concern. The kid was in his 20s. He could get a job like everyone else. I wasn't about to be manipulated by a last-ditch appeal to a non-existent conscience. I stood up and walked away without looking back. This was his reckoning.